I've lived on the edge of Pinebrook Estates for almost 10 years now, a quiet suburban community wrapped in manicured lawns, beige vinyl fences, and the unmistakable air of control that comes with a powerful HOA. My 5-acre property sits right outside their boundary, a patch of land my grandfather left me, complete with an old farmhouse, a barn, and a thick tree-line that separates me from the HOA's neat little world. I never paid their dues, never attended their meetings, and never wanted anything to do with their constant rulemaking. I liked my independence. I liked the freedom to mow when I wanted, to paint my house whatever color I wanted, and to park my Harley and old pickup wherever I pleased. But the HOA didn't like having someone nearby who wasn't under their thumb, especially not someone like me. The trouble really started about a year ago, when Karen showed up. You could spot her from a mile away, platinum blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and that sharp, judgmental squint that could cut glass. She'd recently been elected HOA president, and she wore that title like a crown. The first time we met, she came up my driveway without knocking, clipboard in hand, heels sinking into the gravel. "You know," she said, peering over my fence, "your property really brings down the aesthetic of Pinebrook Estates." I leaned against my porch post, coffee mug in hand, and told her, "Good thing I'm not in Pinebrook, then." She didn't appreciate the humor. From that day on, I knew she had me marked. At first, it was just petty things. She'd send letters, printed, formal, and full of demands. Please remove unsightly farm equipment. Please keep your dogs from barking. Please refrain from using your chainsaw before 9 a.m. I didn't respond. My land, my rules. Then came the visits. She'd park her silver SUV just past the property line, pretending to check on community safety, but I knew she was looking for something to complain about. Once, she even called the county inspector, claiming I was running an illegal repair shop because I'd been restoring an old tractor in my barn. The inspector came, laughed, and told me not to worry. He knew Karen's type. Everyone did. Months passed, and I thought maybe she'd get bored. But Karen wasn't the type to let go of a grudge. When she couldn't find anything to fine me for, she started scheming. It began subtly. Strange orange flags appeared near my back fence, the kind contractors used to mark utilities. At first, I thought it was the gas company checking lines, maybe prepping for maintenance. I didn't think much of it. Then, one morning, I woke up to the sound of machinery. I stepped out onto my porch and saw 2 men in hard hats operating a mini excavator near the tree line. They were digging, on my side of the property. I marched down there, boots crunching on the gravel, and shouted over the engine noise, "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" One of them shut off the machine and pointed toward the neighborhood. "We're just laying a small gas line extension, sir. HOA president gave us clearance." My jaw nearly dropped. "She doesn't own this land." I barked. The worker shrugged. Said she had approval from the county. I told them to stop immediately and get their supervisor on the phone. They hesitated, but the look on my face must have convinced them I wasn't bluffing. Within half an hour, a white pickup pulled up, and out stepped the site foreman, clipboard, safety vest, and a whole lot of confusion. He showed me the paperwork. The permit was legitimate, issued for a utility extension for Pinebrook Estates. But when I read the parcel number, I froze. It wasn't mine, not exactly. The HOA had submitted a permit using a map that included part of my land, labeling it as undeveloped common area. The nerve of it. They deliberately altered the boundary map to make it look like their property stretched another 50 feet into my woods. And the county, not realizing, approved it without question. I told the foreman to stop all work immediately. He agreed, said he'd call the main office to verify property limits. The men packed up and left for the day, but I knew Karen wouldn't. Sure enough, that evening, her silver SUV rolled up again, and she marched toward me in full fury mode. "You're holding up essential community development," she snapped. "Do you even understand how much paperwork it took to get that approved?" I kept calm. "Yeah," I said, "and you'll be filling out even more after I call the county surveyor." She smirked, like she thought I was bluffing. "Good luck with that," she said, and turned on her heel. That smirk told me everything. She thought she was untouchable. The next morning, I was on the phone with the county assessor's office by 8 a.m. I asked for a full plat map of my property in Pine Brooks. When I compared the two, it was clear as day. Someone had submitted a doctored boundary drawing. The HOA's common area ended exactly at my fence line, not an inch further. I filed a complaint, and the county sent a surveyor out within days. The guy walked the property, verified the markers, and nodded. "You're right," he said. "They're about 53 feet over the line." He filed a formal violation notice that same afternoon, halting the project. I figured that would be the end of it. Maybe Karen would get a fine, maybe a slap on the wrist, and we could all move on. But I underestimated her ego. The following week, I got a certified letter from her attorney. She was suing me. The claim? Interference with community infrastructure and obstruction of approved development. I nearly laughed out loud reading it. The woman had trespassed on my property, altered government documents, and now she was accusing me of obstruction? It was so absurd it would have been funny if it wasn't real. I took the letter to my friend Tom, who happened to be a real estate attorney. He read it, then looked at me like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "This woman's digging her own grave," he said. "You realize she committed property fraud, right?" He offered to take the case, but before we even filed a counterclaim, I wanted to make sure we had solid proof. We got copies of the original plats, permits, and survey reports. Tom even hired a professional GIS analyst to overlay the digital maps. The evidence was clear as daylight. Karen's HOA had extended their boundary on paper by exactly the width of that gas trench. For the next few weeks, I kept my cool. I let her dig her own hole, figuratively this time. She went around Pinebrook bragging that she was finally dealing with the troublemaker next door. She told neighbors I'd blocked essential gas lines, endangered families, and even that I was under investigation. I didn't fight back publicly. Not yet. Because when I do fight, I don't swing wildly, I swing once, and I make sure it lands. Late one night, I sat on my porch, sipping whiskey, watching the lights from Pinebrook shimmer through the trees. I could hear faint laughter and music from some HOA get-together. For a moment, I thought about my grandfather, the man who built this house with his own hands, who taught me what it means to stand your ground. He'd always said, "Land isn't just dirt, boy. It's your name, your backbone. You protect it like family." And that night, I decided, I wasn't going to let some self-appointed queen take even an inch of it. The next morning, I called Tom and said, "File the counterclaim." He grinned. "Thought you'd say that." We didn't just respond, we went on offense. Trespassing, property fraud, false claim, and emotional distress. And while the wheels of the legal system turned, I started documenting everything, photos of the trench, copies of the permits, even video of the construction crew on my side of the fence. I knew the truth was on my side, but I also knew Karen was cunning. She'd try to spin it, twist it, play the victim. But this time, I had the receipts. That's when things started to get truly ugly. Because Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot. And I was just getting started. Karen didn't waste any time escalating her campaign. Within a week of me filing the counterclaim, she went full force into a smear operation. I started getting calls from neighbors I barely knew, people from Pinebrook Estates who wanted to talk about the issues I was causing. One guy named Greg, who worked as the HOA's treasurer, left a voicemail saying, "Look, man, we can work this out privately. Karen's just trying to make sure the neighborhood's safe." If you agree to let the gas line stay, we'll drop the whole lawsuit. I laughed out loud when I heard it. Drop the lawsuit? As if they were the ones doing me a favor. It was my property they trespassed on, my land they cut through, and now they were offering me mercy? No chance. But that message told me something important. Karen was getting nervous. She was trying to find a way out without losing face. I could almost picture her pacing her immaculate living room, phone in hand, barking orders at the HOA board. But she underestimated one thing: I had patience, and I had truth on my side. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I ignored their offers, doubled down, and kept gathering evidence. Tom and I went to the county office in person to request all documentation tied to the HOA's permit application. The clerk, a middle-aged woman who looked exhausted but sharp, flipped through the folders and frowned. "You're not the first one to ask about this," she said. "We had a few complaints already about Pinebrook's boundaries." That got my attention. "From who?" I asked. She smiled tightly. "Can't say. But let's just say you're not the only one fed up with their antics." That told me all I needed to know. The HOA had stepped on more toes than mine. We discovered something even bigger buried in those files. The amended plat map the HOA submitted was digitally altered. The metadata showed it had been edited just days before submission, using Karen's HOA email as the registered sender. She didn't even bother to hide her tracks. That alone was enough to prove intent. Tom's eyes lit up. "That's it," he said. "This isn't just a civil case anymore. This is criminal." He reached out to the county prosecutor's office, and before long, an investigation was opened into the falsified documents. Things were turning fast, and Karen had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down on her theatrics. She started organizing community meetings in the HOA clubhouse, framing me as a public safety threat. Flyers showed up in mailboxes claiming I was illegally obstructing a critical utility. She even posted on social media long, self-righteous rants about how some individuals don't care about the safety of families, and certain landowners outside our community refuse to cooperate with vital infrastructure. She never mentioned my name, but everyone in Pinebrook knew who she meant. My inbox filled with messages, some angry, some apologetic. A few neighbors even stopped by my gate just to see what was going on. One afternoon, as I was tightening the fence post by the driveway, a woman named Linda, one of the few decent folks from Pinebrook, pulled over. "She's losing it," Linda said quietly, glancing around as if afraid Karen might appear out of thin air. "She's calling emergency meetings, threatening to fine people who don't support her. Half the board is ready to quit." That made me grin. "Good," I said. "Let her implode." Linda nodded, then hesitated. "Just be careful. She's talking about getting the county gas authority involved again. She says she'll finish that line whether you like it or not." Sure enough, 2 days later, another construction notice appeared on my mailbox, this time from the County Utility Commission. The document stated that a review of essential infrastructure permits was underway and that temporary access might be required for inspection. I knew Karen's hand was behind it. She was trying to use bureaucracy as a weapon. But she'd forgotten that paper trails work both ways. I forwarded the notice to Tom, who immediately filed an injunction blocking any further access until the legal case was resolved. The county judge signed it within 24 hours. That night, I caught sight of Karen's SUV parked at the far edge of the cul-de-sac, headlights off, just sitting there. Watching. It wasn't paranoia, I could see her silhouette behind the wheel. I walked out onto my porch with a flashlight and pointed it directly at her car. After a few seconds, she sped off, tires crunching against the pavement. That's when I realized she wasn't just angry, she was obsessed. A week later, we got our first court hearing. The courthouse was small, one of those old brick buildings where everyone knows everyone. Karen strutted in wearing a crisp white suit, her lawyer trailing behind her like a nervous intern. She smiled at me like we were about to discuss a property line over coffee. I gave her a polite nod. Tom whispered, "Let her talk. The more she says, the better." And talk she did. Her attorney launched into a speech about community progress and public benefit, claiming that the defendant's refusal to allow utility access endangered dozens of households. The judge listened, expressionless. Then it was our turn. Tom stood, calm and methodical, and laid out the evidence: original plats, photos, timestamps, the edited metadata, even the signed permit showing Karen's digital signature on the altered map. The courtroom went silent as he explained how the HOA had forged public documents to extend its control. Karen's face turned crimson. Her lawyer fumbled his papers, muttering something about clerical error, but it was too late. The judge leaned forward and asked Karen directly, "Mrs. Wilkins, did you authorize this permit application?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. I approve the project, yes, but the details, answer the question," the judge interrupted. "Did you authorize the submission?" She stammered, "Yes, but I didn't know," the judge cut her off again. "Then you bear responsibility." That hearing ended with the judge ordering a temporary halt to all HOA utility projects and a formal review of their permit history. Karen stormed out before the session even adjourned. Outside, she walked right up to me, fury etched across her face. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I leaned closer, smiled slightly, and said, "Oh, I think I do." After that day, the tone changed. Karen stopped playing the neighborhood leader and started playing the victim. She went online claiming she was being harassed by a vindictive landowner. She told anyone who'd listen that I'd hacked county systems to frame her. The lies were almost funny, until they weren't. One night, around midnight, my security camera caught something disturbing: two men in dark jackets walking along my fence line, flashlights sweeping across the dirt near where the trench had been dug. They weren't county workers. They were trying to finish what Karen started. I called the sheriff's office, and a deputy came out within minutes. We reviewed the footage, and he recognized one of them, a local contractor who'd been hired by Pinebrook before. "Looks like she's running off the books work," he said grimly. "We'll handle it." The next morning, those same men were picked up for trespassing. And when they were questioned, one of them cracked. He admitted Karen had paid them in cash to survey the trench and prepare for pipe installation. She didn't even try to deny it when the deputy confronted her. Instead, she claimed it was all a misunderstanding. That misunderstanding cost her $5,000 in fines and another legal strike against her case. But even that didn't stop her. She called a press conference. An actual press conference. She stood in front of the Pinebrook clubhouse, reporters' mics lined up, and gave a speech about corruption in rural property management and abuse of legal power. She framed herself as a hero standing up against a man trying to block progress. I watched the broadcast from my living room, shaking my head. It was surreal watching her twist the truth so publicly. But Tom told me not to worry. "She's building her own rope," he said. "Every lie she tells now will hang her later." Behind the scenes, the county prosecutor's investigation was moving fast. They'd confirmed the digital tampering and linked it directly to Karen's HOA account. Not only that, but they found similar discrepancies in two other permit applications from the previous year, projects where she'd slightly adjusted boundary lines to absorb neighboring land into HOA control. It wasn't just me she targeted. She'd been quietly expanding Pinebrook's footprint, parcel by parcel, pretending it was all part of community improvement. My case had simply brought it all into the light. The next time we went to court, the atmosphere was different. Karen looked worn out, hair less perfect, makeup slightly smeared, her usual confidence replaced with something desperate. Her lawyer had changed too, apparently. Her first one had quit after realizing how bad the evidence looked. This new one wasn't much better. When the prosecutor presented the metadata and email trail, the defense tried to claim that the file was altered by a third party, but the judge wasn't buying it. The room was thick with tension. Every word Karen spoke dug her deeper. As we walked out of the courthouse that day, Tom put a hand on my shoulder and said, "It's just a matter of time now. She's cooked." I nodded, but I wasn't celebrating yet. I'd seen how far she was willing to go, and I had a feeling she wasn't done being reckless. People like Karen didn't surrender gracefully, they imploded. And when they did, they took everything around them down in flames. I didn't have to wait long to be proven right. After that second court hearing, Karen's behavior went from bad to unhinged. You could tell the pressure was eating her alive. Her once pristine reputation as the face of Pinebrook was crumbling fast. The HOA board had split into factions. Half of them wanted her gone, the other half were too afraid to defy her publicly. But fear only lasts so long when the truth starts leaking out. Rumors spread that the county prosecutor had enough evidence to charge her with document falsification and unauthorized land use. Karen's perfect world was cracking, and when that kind of person starts losing control, they get dangerous. I began noticing strange things happening around my property. At first, it was small stuff. My mailbox got knocked over twice in a week. Trash mysteriously appeared near my fence line, HOA flyers soaked in oil and dirt. Then, one morning, I found a pile of orange construction markers tossed onto my driveway with a note that read, "You can't stop progress." It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. The handwriting was hers, neat, deliberate, the same way she'd written those friendly notices months earlier. I took photos of everything and sent them straight to Tom, who added it to our growing case file. He called it psychological warfare, but I called it what it was, desperation. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, around 11:30 p.m. The air was still, the sky clear enough to see the stars through the treetops. I just turned off the TV and was heading to bed when I caught a faint sound outside, metal clanking, maybe 50 yards from the house. At first, I thought it was a raccoon messing with the barn door, but then I saw the glow. A dull orange shimmer through the trees, right where the old trench had been. My gut tightened. I grabbed my flashlight and the old revolver I kept for coyotes, then stepped out the back door quietly. As I approached the tree line, the glow got brighter, and then I saw it. Someone was kneeling beside the trench, a flashlight strapped to their head, holding a gas torch and a length of pipe. They were trying to reconnect the gas line. My pulse shot up. I shouted, "Hey! Stop right there." The person froze, then bolted toward the fence. I caught a glimpse of blonde hair under the headlamp before they dropped it and disappeared into the dark. I ran to the trench, heart pounding, and saw what she'd done. She'd pried open the sealed cap on the gas line the workers had left and tried to weld a new section of pipe onto it. The ground reeked of natural gas. I backed up fast, called 911, and told the dispatcher what was happening. Within minutes, the fire department and sheriff's deputies arrived. They shut off the main valve from the road and swept the area. The firefighters confirmed it, the line had been tampered with, and if she'd managed to light that torch again, the explosion could have taken out half my property. The deputy took my statement, then collected the dropped headlamp. On the inside strap was a tag with Karen's name on it, Pinebrook HOA Equipment, property of K. Wilkins. It was the smoking gun. The next morning, the sheriff himself showed up. He told me Karen had been brought in for questioning. She denied everything, of course. Claimed she'd been asleep at home, even though security camera footage from a neighbor down the road caught her silver SUV parked near the cul-de-sac minutes before I called 911. The footage, the headlamp, the timing, it all lined up perfectly. That was the last straw for the county prosecutor. Within days, they filed official charges against her for trespassing, property damage, and reckless endangerment. Suddenly, the woman who'd once strutted around in high heels telling people how to arrange their mailboxes was facing criminal court. Word spread through Pine Brook like wildfire. By the end of the week, the HOA board held an emergency vote and removed her as president. Linda, the neighbor who'd warned me earlier, called and told me the meeting had been brutal. She screamed at everyone, Linda said. Called us traitors, said this was all a setup. She even tried to lock herself in the clubhouse. I couldn't help but laugh. Sounds like she's finally realizing the show's over. But deep down, I didn't feel much joy, just relief. I'd been living under her shadow for nearly a year, and now the storm was finally passing. But before the case could go to trial, Karen tried one last move. Her new lawyer reached out to Tom with a settlement proposal. They wanted me to drop my counterclaim and agree to non-disclosure, in exchange for $75,000 and a written apology. I didn't even have to think about it. I told Tom, no deal. I want the truth on record. He smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. We were in too deep for hush money now. This wasn't about cash. It was about accountability. The trial lasted 4 days. The courtroom was packed, reporters, neighbors, even county officials. Everyone wanted to see how it would end. Karen sat there in her tailored suit, trying to look composed, but the tension was visible in her twitching fingers and tight jaw. The prosecution presented the evidence methodically, the altered maps, the forged permits, the surveillance footage, and finally, the gas line incident. When they played the 911 recording with my voice shouting, "Stop right there," you could hear a pin drop. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it as mistaken identity and circumstantial evidence, but by the third day, even the jury looked unconvinced. On the final day, the prosecutor delivered the closing statement like a hammer blow. This case isn't about a simple property line, he said. It's about power, the kind that corrupts, manipulates, and endangers others when left unchecked. He turned toward Karen. The defendant abused her authority, falsified documents, and risked human lives to protect her ego. That's not leadership. That's criminal. I'll never forget that moment. Karen wouldn't look at anyone, just stared straight ahead, motionless, like she'd turned to stone. The verdict came back after 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Trespassing. Fraudulent alteration of documents. Reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a hefty fine that would take a long time to pay off. But the real blow was the court's order that she personally issue a public apology to me and my family, to be read at a county hearing and published in the local paper. Watching her forced to stand there and read those words, her voice trembling, was poetic justice. She could barely get through it. After the sentencing, Tom and I stepped outside the courthouse. The autumn air felt crisp, cleaner somehow. Reporters swarmed us, asking how I felt about the outcome. I kept it simple. Justice was served, I said. All I ever wanted was for people to respect boundaries, physical and moral. Then I turned and walked away. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without checking my security cameras every few hours. But the story didn't end there. Pine Brook's HOA was in shambles. Half the board resigned, and the county ordered a full audit of their operations. It turned out Karen had been cutting corners for years, pocketing funds meant for maintenance, approving unlicensed contractors, even inflating dues to cover administrative costs. The community was furious. They held a meeting without her, voted to dissolve the existing HOA, and began forming a new neighborhood council with oversight from the county. Linda called to tell me about it. You should have seen it, she said. For once, people actually spoke up. I could hear the pride in her voice. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail from the county prosecutor's office thanking me for my cooperation. They even enclosed a photo of the old falsified plat map, now stamped void, fraudulent. I pinned it in my workshop, right above my grandfather's old tools. A reminder that no matter how modern the world gets, some things never change, people still try to take what isn't theirs, and it still takes grit to stop them. One evening, as I stood on my porch watching the sunset over the tree line, I saw something that made me pause. A for sale sign had gone up outside Karen's house. The lawn was overgrown, her flower beds dead, her once proud mailbox leaning to the side. Pinebrook's queen had fallen. I can't say I felt joy, more like closure. I poured myself a drink, raised it toward the fading light, and whispered, "Rest easy, Grandpa. The land's safe." But just as I thought it was over, life had one more surprise in store. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a gold seal on the flap. Inside was a formal notice, regarding upcoming civil restitution hearing, Karen Wilkins vs. Pinebrook Estates HOA Board. Apparently, she was turning on her own people now, suing them for negligence and betrayal. I shook my head and laughed. Karen hadn't learned a damn thing. I put the letter down, stepped outside, and looked toward the quiet, empty cul-de-sac where all this had started. The gas line trench was long filled, grass grown over it, as if it had never existed. But I remembered every inch of that scar in the dirt, and what it cost to reclaim it. Sometimes justice isn't just about winning. It's about standing firm when everyone else bends. That was the last I ever saw or heard of Karen Wilkins. Pinebrook slowly went back to being just another quiet suburban development. The air felt lighter. The road seemed friendlier. And me? I stayed right where I was, on my land, the same land my grandfather had protected, now safe for another generation. They say every town has its story. Pinebrook's just happens to end with a woman who thought she could rewrite the map, and a man who proved she couldn't. The of it, every argument, every sleepless night, every inch of dirt she tried to steal. And though I finally had peace, I knew the storm had changed me. You don't go through a war like that and walk away untouched. I'd learned just how far some people will go to hold power, and how important it is to stand your ground, no matter how small your patch of land might be. When the restitution hearing came around, I didn't plan to attend, but curiosity got the better of me. The courthouse was smaller this time, more subdued, but the tension was thick. Karen had filed the suit against the HOA board, claiming emotional distress, reputational damage, and wrongful expulsion. The irony was almost poetic. The same woman who'd tried to ruin my life was now turning on the very people who once worshipped her. Most of the old board didn't even show up, they'd already resigned in disgrace. The few who did looked beaten, tired, and desperate to wash their hands of the entire affair. Karen walked in dressed to impress, navy suit, pearls, hair perfectly curled, like she was trying to resurrect her old self. But the confidence wasn't there anymore. She looked brittle, hollowed out by her own obsession. Her attorney tried to make a show of it, painting her as a victim of institutional betrayal and public humiliation, but the judge wasn't buying it. Halfway through her testimony, she broke down crying, claiming the media had destroyed her family and that she only ever wanted to protect the community. The judge listened politely, then asked a single question that silenced the room. "Mrs. Wilkins, do you understand that you created the circumstances that led to your own downfall?" She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, shoulders trembling. By the end of the hearing, her lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file again. The judge even reprimanded her for wasting the court's time and resources. Watching her walk out, defeated yet still defiant, was like watching the last ember of a fire finally burn out. Pinebrook would never see another like her again. And good riddance. In the months that followed, the neighborhood slowly came back to life. The new community council worked with the county to repair the damages left behind, both physical and financial. They tore down the old Pinebrook HOA sign, replacing it with a modest wooden one that simply read "Welcome to Pinebrook Estates, a community that cares." It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. People smiled more, waved at each other again, held barbecues without worrying about citation letters. Even the kids were allowed to play ball in the cul-de-sac now. It felt like the neighborhood had finally exhaled. One afternoon, Linda stopped by with a basket of cookies and a grin. "You won't believe this," she said, holding up a newspaper. The headline read, "Former HOA President Moves Out of County Following Legal Defeat." Turns out Karen had sold her house at a loss and moved 2 towns over. "Guess she finally ran out of gas," Linda joked, and we both laughed harder than we had in a long time. It felt good, not cruel, just cathartic. For the first time, the laughter didn't carry any bitterness. As for me, I went back to living quietly, the way I always preferred. I fixed up my barn, built a small greenhouse, and started growing tomatoes and peppers again. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing toward the road, half expecting to see her SUV roll by, but it never did. Instead, there were new families moving in, kids riding bikes, people planting flowers where Karen's "No Garden" signs used to stand. Life was returning to normal, and I was finally ready to let go of the anger. Still, every once in a while, I'd pull out the old evidence box from the trial, the photos, the headlamp tag, the court documents, just to remind myself of what happens when power goes unchecked. Not out of spite, but as a lesson. My grandfather used to say, "Land remembers who respects it." I understand that now. The soil out back, the fence line she tried to steal, they all bear witness to what we endure and what we defend. A year after the verdict, Pinebrook hosted its first community fair, something the old HOA would have never allowed. Kids painted pumpkins, neighbors shared food, and a local band played near the pond. As the sun set and lanterns began to glow, the new council chair took the mic. She thanked everyone for rebuilding, then said something that hit me deep: "Sometimes, it takes losing what's broken to build something honest." The crowd cheered, and I couldn't help but smile. She was right. Out of all the chaos, we'd built something stronger. That night, as I walked home under the stars, I stopped by the spot where the gas line used to run. The grass had grown thick, the earth healed. I knelt, pressed my hand to the ground, and whispered, "It's over." The breeze rustled the trees like an answer. For the first time in a long while, I truly believed it. But as I turned to leave, a faint sound caught my ear, a truck engine in the distance. Headlights flickered down the road and paused near the cul-de-sac. A moving van. A young couple stepped out, followed by a little girl chasing a golden retriever. The sight made me chuckle. Pinebrook was finally in good hands again. I tipped my hat to the setting sun and headed inside, leaving the past where it belonged, buried deep, under solid ground that no one would ever take from me again. A full year passed since the gas line incident, and Pinebrook had never felt more peaceful. The lawns looked greener, the air lighter, and for once, the word HOA didn't make anyone's blood pressure rise. I thought the chapter had closed completely, until one fall morning, a thick white envelope arrived in my mailbox, marked Certified Legal Notice. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The return address read, Wilkins and Associates Legal Group. Karen's name wasn't there, but I recognized the firm she used during the early stages of her madness. My first thought was, what now? But as I tore it open, I realized it wasn't a new attack, it was the final echo of her defeat. Inside was a notice of property reassignment. The gas line that had caused all the chaos was officially being rerouted, permanently, off my land. The county had approved a new layout that bypassed my property completely, and the new HOA council had included a personal letter thanking me for standing firm and defending community integrity. They even enclosed a small plaque that read, in recognition of civic courage, for reminding us what it means to own your land. It wasn't something I'd ever asked for, but holding it in my hands felt like closure. Not victory, just peace. Later that day, I walked out to the back acreage where the first illegal pipe had been found. The trench was long gone now, the earth smooth and overgrown. I stood there for a while, listening to the wind ripple through the trees. For the first time, it didn't sound like a warning, it sounded like freedom. My mind wandered to everything that had happened, the lies, the lawsuits, the late-night confrontations under that buzzing streetlight. It felt like a lifetime ago. And yet, if you'd told me back then that I'd come out of it stronger, wiser, and strangely grateful, I'd have called you crazy. But standing there now, boots planted in my own dirt, I understood. Every battle leaves you with scars, but also with roots. That night, I sat on the porch with a cold beer and watched the stars blink to life. Linda joined me a few minutes later, carrying a jar of homemade peach preserves. 1 year since you nearly blew up the HOA, she teased. I laughed. You mean since the HOA nearly blew up me? We toasted to peace, and to the kind of quiet you only earn after a storm. The neighborhood lights twinkled in the distance, soft and warm. Somewhere, a dog barked, and a kid's laughter echoed faintly. It was the kind of ordinary evening that used to feel impossible. A few weeks later, a letter came from the county's environmental board. They'd completed a full investigation into the illegal gas installation and, surprisingly, discovered that Karen's crew had done similar unauthorized work in another neighborhood before mine. The report concluded with a line that stuck with me: negligence born of arrogance endangers everyone. It summed her up perfectly. Turns out, she'd been fined heavily, not by me, not by the HOA, but by the state itself. Justice had its own timing, but it always found its way. I kept that letter pinned above my workshop desk, right next to a photo of my grandfather standing on this same land, decades ago. He'd always said, "This dirt will test you, boy. Just don't let anyone else claim what you bled for." I hadn't understood the weight of those words until now. This wasn't just about property, it was about principle. About knowing where you stand, and refusing to be pushed off it, no matter how powerful your opponent pretends to be. By spring, Pinebrook had transformed completely. The new HOA, really just a volunteer council now, focused on community projects instead of punishment. We built a public garden, hosted weekend barbecues, and even organized a clean energy day, where local kids learned how gas lines worked, safely this time. Life had come full circle, and the irony wasn't lost on me. The very thing Karen tried to weaponize against me became the lesson that brought everyone together. One Saturday morning, as I watched the sunrise over the fields, a moving truck rumbled past my driveway. A middle-aged man leaned out the window and called, "Hey, you must be the guy who took down that crazy HOA lady." I chuckled and waved it off, but inside, I felt something shift. I wasn't just the guy who fought Karen anymore, I was the guy who proved that one person, standing firm, could change the course of a whole neighborhood. Before heading back inside, I took one last look at the land. The grass shimmered gold in the early light, the fence stood straight and proud, and the faint smell of dew mixed with earth filled the air. I realized then that this place, my place, had outlasted every lie, every fight, every ounce of greed thrown at it. It was still here. So was I. When I finally sat down at my workbench, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 6 simple words across the first page: respect the land. Protect your ground. Then I closed it, leaned back, and smiled. The war with Karen was over, but the lesson she left behind would last forever.